Phillip. Hello, Database. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. We have people from all over the world today and always, but today's a special session with the Hive Southeast Asia. So if you would like to let us know your location, we'd love to learn where you're joining us from in the chat. Okay, great. And the room is filling up. I'm personally in the Bay Area in California. Where else is everyone from? Okay, we're just going to give it one more second while the room fills up. Awesome, great. We're super excited for today. We're going to be debuting the newest edition of the Hive family, the Hive Southeast Asia, headed by our dear friend Haizam. We've teamed up with the Hive Southeast Asia to bring you an incredible event with a panel of Southeast Asian regional leaders who are going to share their experiences, their expertise. They're going to talk about what makes Southeast Asia a unique opportunity for entrepreneurs and investors, what market spaces are really white hot right now, and how to achieve growth, sustainability, and agility in an increasingly volatile world. So Ravi, if you don't mind just putting the slides up, that would be great. Thank you. And for those who don't know me, my name is Maddie Watt. I am the Senior Manager of People and Programs at the Hive. We are based in Palo Alto. And I'm going to just briefly tell you guys what the Hive Think Tank does. And then I will pass the virtual mic over to TM Ravi. Thank you, Ravi. Can you do the next slide for me? Awesome, great. So the Hive Think Tank, we are an event and content platform. We foster an ecosystem of investors, entrepreneurs, corporate thought leaders, and we are bringing you events and pieces on thought leadership about every other week. During the pandemic, we've been completely virtual. I'm going to drop the links for how to find out more about what we've got going on so you can stay abreast of everything we're doing and join the Hive Think Tank. Next slide, Ravi. We want to thank our sponsors. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor of the Hive Think Tank, we would love to hear more. That's my contact info, and I will drop that in the chat as well. Thank you, Ravi. And next week, we have an incredible event. These are some really amazing guest speakers on edge computing. So we're going to talk all about applications at the edge, cloud, how the edge and the cloud interact with each other. How do we define edge? It's a really huge buzzword and very trendy right now. Gartner's expecting that enterprise data will be moving to the edge at, I think, a rate about 75% by 2025. So it's a very hot topic right now. We'd love for you to join us. For those of you that are in Southeast Asia, this is going to be in the middle of the night for you guys, but don't worry, I'm going to drop the link. And if you go ahead and pre-register with Zoom webinars, you will get an automated email with the recording after the session is done. So please do sign up for it. Okay, great. And without further ado, I want to introduce TM Ravi, the Hive's Managing Director. And one quick note, guys, when you interact with our panelists today, please use the Q&A function. It's at the bottom of your screen. It's a button, and that's how you're going to ask the presenters questions. That way you can upvote them, and they're all in one nice, neat space for our moderator, Andrew. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Matty, and thank you for making this happen. A special welcome to all our guests who are joining in from Malaysia and Southeast Asia. The Hive, which is based here in Silicon Valley, is a venture capital entity, and it's an early stage venture capital entity that is focused on the long term and think about kind of multi-decade long transformation of various industries and industry segments, leveraging data, AI, the cloud, and so on. Here in the US, our focus is very much on the enterprise and a few key segments that you see there. And here we are very thematic in the way we think about these different areas. So we are thinking about how areas like enterprise SaaS or security, privacy, and governance, or the kind of multi-trillion-dollar kind of industrial sector are going to be transformed over the next 20 years, and helping create companies to drive that transformation. I'm especially sort of excited today to introduce the managing director of the Hive Southeast Asia, Haizam, who will introduce what we are doing in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. Haizam?
Hi, thanks Ravi, and also to Matty, and also thank you to our esteemed panelists for doing this talk, which I'm really excited about. Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to quickly introduce the Hive Southeast Asia to the audience here. Pending the signing of definitive agreements, TWAS Capital Partners, in collaboration with Sunway, will be running a co-creation and seed fund under Penjana Capital. So utilizing the Hive's unique and proven co-creation model, we're looking at collaborating with local and regional corporates to build and invest into companies that will digitalize Malaysia and the region into the fourth industrial revolution. We're very excited to work with the Hive and will undoubtedly benefit from their expertise and deep ecosystem relationships in Silicon Valley, and will create a conduit for innovation and greater value generation between the US and Malaysia. Ourselves and also our investee companies, our future investee companies, will benefit from the Hive's presence in India and Brazil. And this will also enable greater global collaboration with Malaysia and digital growth. And of course, we also have good friends within the region, including Pandu and AC Ventures. Today's think tank event marks the start of the Hive Southeast Asia series of think tank sessions that we aim to host monthly. Hopefully our sessions will have the same impact and outputs that the Hive think tank events held in Silicon Valley has had in terms of thought leadership and knowledge transfer. And all of this, along with the Hive's expertise, coupled with the local knowledge and capabilities of TWAS and Sunway, through amongst others, Sunway iLabs and the 42KL Coding School, will hopefully create the right ecosystem for our co-creations and companies to succeed, and the digital solutions to answer the problem statements that will undoubtedly arise in this new normal world that we live in. And the ultimate aim really is to create a thought leadership forum for Malaysia and Southeast Asia through this think tank series. To the audience here today, entrepreneurs, startups, coders, corporates, investors, we would definitely like to hear from you. At the end of the day, we are looking at creating and kickstarting a vibrant ecosystem that will enable technology and innovation from our companies to thrive. For example, what issues are there that will undoubtedly be disrupted in the near future, and ideas on what companies we should build to solve them. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Andrew G, who'll be moderating this great lineup that we have to you. Andrew?
Thank you, Haizam. So hi, everyone who's on the call. My name is Andrew Gnananantham, Andrew G for short, because that last name is a bit of a struggle, even for me sometimes. So I was previously the Chief Marketing Officer of Lazaada and EVP at Lazaada Group. Now I'm an active investor and advisor to startups. Before I start this panel, we're pretty excited to have this group. Can I just get a brief 2-sentence introduction from each one of you? Azran, if I can start with you.
Hey guys, so my name's Azran. I've been building a number of businesses across multiple industries, from regulated capital-intensive businesses to fast-moving internet businesses and now healthcare.
Nice. Surina, could I pass the mic to you for quick 2 sentences?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Surina Shukri. I'm a returning Malaysian. I spent my career in the US, Silicon Alley, not Valley, but in my mind. I'm CEO of Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, and our job is to help develop the digital economy and lead the digital economy forward. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Thanks,
Surina. Pandu, could I pass the mic to you?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Pandu Sjahrir. I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm an investor. The company that we own is called AC Ventures. And now, obviously, thanks to Penjana as well, that now we are actively looking and help entrepreneurs out of Malaysia to expand all across Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pandu. So, we've got a topic to try to figure out what is the startup opportunities in the new normal and what startups have done to be more agile and resilient. 2020 has been a bit of a tough year for everyone in the ecosystem. And yet some startups have come out stronger. So I want to start this panel by trying to understand what the companies that have come out stronger of pandemic that we've been in? What have they done differently? Azran, you run a startup. Surina, you're an ecosystem builder. Pandu, you're an active investor. And in some of the companies you've invested in have come out incredibly, incredibly strong. So can I start with Azran again? Azran, as a startup founder, what are the lessons to other founders, to other investors on how you've dealt with this and how you've come out stronger from this?
Well, I guess a few things. Number one, cash and funding, because that is the lifeline, because, without that, it's game over. I think, in a period of extreme uncertainty, trying to raise funds from new investors who might not know you is virtually impossible. And so therefore, building kind of longer relationships with investors over years, right? So ultimately, for example, we raised a round in the midst of the pandemic in April, and we're doing it again now. And the investors that have come on board were ones that we've been cultivating that relationship over the last 2 years. Some had invested in earlier rounds and some had not, but we still kind of kept in touch. So the importance of building those long-term ongoing relationships, I can't overemphasize. I think secondly, it is, the ability to stay very, very close to clients, to adapt our service offering, because, obviously there are things that we can no longer do. We can't meet people in person, so that again requires a lot of much more frequent touch with clients. And lastly, with our team members, I mean, we moved to double daily stand-ups, right? 9 to 9:15, 5:45 to 6, because you can't over communicate during periods of uncertainty.
Got it. Thanks for that, Azran. Pandu, if I could throw that back to you, do you see that with your investor cap on, do you see that most startups are saying we need to build massive war chests? It's not just about the shorter runways. Are they coming to you and with a much larger request? And so do we see funding going only at the larger scales now? What have you seen?
I think, yeah, Series A, I think has gotten bigger. I think now Series A ranges used to be 5 million, maximum 10 million. Now you're seeing it 25 million on a Series A. So, the nomenclature has changed from seed, pre-Series A, now become Series A. So it's like a bunch of rounds that have come in the last 7 years, right? So yeah, I think overall, I think Series B will get larger, Series C will definitely get larger, but it's just, there's abundance of capital. And if you are able to hit a certain traction, you're able to go out on a Series A on a much larger scale. I mean, that's just the reality today.
Got it. Thanks for that. Surina, if I could throw that back to you, does that, from your perspective, what does that mean for the early stage startups, seed stage startups? Like if all these funding rounds are becoming bigger and bigger, then what happens to angel investment rounds and smaller seed stage rounds? How do you see the ecosystem evolving? Is there places to play for things like co-creation, what the Hive is doing, or other kinds of startup studios? What do you see happening?
I would say absolutely yes. But the thing is, from a startup standpoint, one of the most important things, Azran alluded to that earlier, is fundraising. And so typically, startup founders at the very beginning, even when they start, they need to already start thinking that their institution, they need to pitch big, they need to know how to pitch. They need to know how they need to start building relationships with investors already. Because typically the typical mindset is that, oh, never mind, I'm not, I'll start with friends and family first. And so all your setup from the very beginning is not as established. And then you wait. That no longer can be the case. So certainly from our side, one of the things that we do to enable the ecosystem is to spend a lot more time on that. So during COVID, for example, one of the things that we launched was just investor introductions. And so a lot more of that. We ran a lot of let's teach you how to pitch kind of thing. We even ran media presence, media training for some of the startup founders, because telling your story is really, really, really important.
That's super interesting. So it seems like the activities and how, what MDEC does has changed. If I could, look at the overarching MDEC strategy, has the MDEC strategy changed given what has happened in 2020?
Yeah. So I'll touch on it on twofold because more people, so our mandate is quite broad, and because when you touch digital economy broadly, you kind of have your hands in all of it. So the best way I explain to my family is that, well, there's boutique agencies, and then there's it's like we're like the JP Morgan of agencies, because we have our hands in a lot of different things. Operations, even. A lot of people don't realize this. I was just sharing with Azran yesterday, to facilitate the whole thing end to end. Expats coming to the country, we help process those applications as well. But coming back to that, so we have a big skilling agenda. So somebody mentioned, Ecole 42. That was some of the work that we did last year to help bring Ecole 42 in to help develop that. Skilling agenda, we still continue to work around building the tech ecosystem. So the work that we do within the startup space, within the tech space, within the big tech space, that also continues. But the push these days right now is helping to drive adoption. That's where we are. So digital economy in Malaysia, 20% of the GDP today. But the opportunity really, and the real opportunity for investors, for startups, is with this other 80%. We're helping to drive adoption. We're helping to drive adoption across all the different industries at the moment. We're working very closely with the private sector and other government ministries and agencies as well. So we continue to do the work in the tech space, in the tech vertical, but we also are expanding to help drive particularly the thought leadership as it relates to driving adoption on the other 80% of Malaysia that where the opportunity really is right now.
Got it. So I'll just take that and see if Pandu or Azran have something to comment. So unemployment across Southeast Asia is high. Many people have lost businesses as well. But if I hear what you're saying, right, Surina, you think that entrepreneurship might actually increase because people who are now out of jobs, out of businesses, may actually want to get into business, want to start businesses. Why do you think risk aversion will be low and people will actually want to take that step, given what has happened?
So I don't think risk aversion will be low. I think you'll still have it, but you'll see more success stories of the ones that have done it. So that will inspire the innovators to step up a little bit more. So I think as a general matter, Southeast Asia is very risk averse. Malaysia is no different.
Yeah.
But you will have to see people to say, hey, I saw that guy do it. Let me try too. So they will be the brave ones that try, and those are the ones that will be capturing and helping to nurture and push along.
Got it. Azran, what do you think about that? Like, do you see that happening as well?
Anecdotally, like I don't know. I don't have a macro view the way Surina has. We've been extremely focused on doing what we need to do to get going.
Got it. Pandu, if I could throw that back to you, I mean, where do you see, and you've got the Indonesia lens as well, where do you see the new opportunities coming from? Like, obviously the last 10 years, the unicorns have come from very common places, e-commerce, logistics, and then you've got fintech now. Fintech's a big buzzword. If these new groups of entrepreneurs are entering the ecosystem now, where's post these current like big companies, where's the next opportunity?
Well, I think e-commerce logistics is still very new, right? I mean, the industry itself is still very new. We're only in year 7. So what is that? 84 months, not even 100 months old. So right. Yeah, you see unicorn. I mean, you see decacorn or whatever. I mean, C now is 100 billion. So I forgot what was whatever corn, right? So, yeah. But essentially it's still so early, right? So there's a lot of businesses you can do out of the e-commerce system. Obviously logistics, you can do first mile, middle mile, last mile. Fintech, you can do processing, payment, banks, right? Anything surrounding those two is actually still a quite significant opportunity because we're still early. So a lot of the stories in the US, stories in China, we can kind of duplicate out of it. Okay, then we can play the secondary market, right? Like education, in Indonesia specifically, fisheries, right? So maritime business, because Indonesia is such a big market for maritime. You can also do agri-tech, but then, where you can learn from the Israelis. The only difference is that Indonesia is so rich of stuff, sometimes you don't even need to be efficient, right? So, but anyway, I mean, just this is just thinking out loud, right? But it's essentially the 3 pillars of the businesses: the fintech, the e-commerce, travel, but even travel now has already been formed. Those are kind of like still an early stage, I would argue. Like if you talk about fintech, the big one, Shopee Pay just started last year, really here, right? Still very new. So the opportunity, I think, is still a lot because it's just so early. So you don't even have to be too thinking outside the box, just think within the box, and there's still a lot of opportunity.
Nice. I like that area of thinking. I think being 5+ years in e-commerce has made me feel like it was 30 years and not 5.
Yeah.
Hence where that question comes
It's
from.
just things are moving so fast. Like the way you think about it, here obviously there's this Gojek Toko merger, which will obviously make it a very big, significant player. And there's going to be a lot of shift happening in the e-money space, fintech space. What will happen to OVO? What will happen to the others, right? And these are all already unicorns, right? And that's also interesting. I mean, if you're an investor, you always think, whatever the behavior of these tech conglomerate, I like to call them conglomerate, right? How will that change the way investors will allocate capital, right? How will that also change the competitive landscape across all these different verticals? So, I mean, you kind of do a little bit of game theory. That's what we always do, but it's fun. Also makes it good time for coffee to do game theory. So
let me just push you a bit on that because you like this game theory.
Yep.
How you've seen Indonesia and you've got the front row seat there, and you're also looking at all these other activities across Southeast Asia. Do you see the same kinds of activities that are happening in Indonesia happening across the board, or where is that slightly different in which markets?
So each market is a bit different. I've been so privileged to be able to look at Philippines. When we established the C office there, it's really interesting because it's dominated by 10 families. Sorry for those that's from Philippines. Yeah. But it's really fun though. I mean, Philippines is a great place. And then, Thailand is also a bit different what's going on there. So Singapore, definitely very different. Vietnam is actually probably pretty more similar to Indonesia, right? Myanmar is a bit too far, right? And Cambodia, still very early. Yeah. And then Malaysia, obviously, who's more advanced as an economy than Indo, but the issue is that obviously smaller population, right? But there's a lot of mobility businesses, given the fact that out of Malaysia, I mean, that's where the way it started was car manufacturing, right? Yeah. It was actually one of the first countries that started its own national car program. And that's why you actually had Grab. Grab started from there. And now all the big car mobility actually is coming out of Malaysia, which is trying to have Southeast Asia present. So each country is a bit unique. You cannot just put one way to do it. You got to learn how to be local. You got to have at least a local partner element to each of the country you operate, because Southeast Asia is just a very unique place to do business in, right? It just makes it a lot more fun. But that's why I think you cannot just slap one way and you can do it all over, right? Nice. So even e-commerce is different, right, in each places, right?
Agreed. Appreciate that. Azran, I'm going to throw this back to you because I realize that a lot of the companies that Pandu spoke about, you've been in a very different field because you went from travel tech to content media tech, and then now you're in health tech. So you've passed the cliche Southeast Asian typical tech, right? So what drives you towards these companies? Where do you see, and you probably have a macro view of these opportunities in Southeast Asia. How do you see that evolving over time? So two-part question. One, how do you see that evolving? And two, I also noticed that when you were building these companies, you had to have a multi-country presence. You had to look at outside of Southeast Asia, right? So how is Southeast Asia in these fields that you're in evolving differently versus the BRICS or other third world developing areas?
Thanks, Andrew. I think it's very interesting to build on what Pandu mentioned, because coming from a small market like Malaysia, by definition, I think we have a much more urgent imperative to expand to other markets because we don't have the domestic markets of Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, right? And that is a very complex proposition, as Pandu mentioned, but it actually does require a very different skill set, a different perspective. How do you build those foundations early on, right? Even at a Series A level, how do you think about running 5 different countries? What's the infrastructure you need, the talent you need? How do you engage regulators, knowing that payment channels, data hosting requirements are all different, right? It is a lot more complex, and I think by nature, us Malaysians, we have to do it because that's the only way we can survive, because this domestic market is too small, right? And I think to build on to your second question, for me, I guess maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, that I try to look for difficult problems to start with. So it is harder because there are no established precedents. So for example, one of our big challenges in what we're trying to do with healthcare today is, frankly, many Southeast Asian investors don't get it, right? They're still asking us about CAC and LTV and trying to compare us to B2C and e-commerce metrics, because that's what they used to. That's the 90% of the business models and pitches that they see, right? And so the problem that we solve and how we do it is very different. But this, to me, I take that in stride. That's part of trying to reshape the landscape rather than just kind of doing more of the same. But that means you just lose more hair in the process.
Got it. I feel you, Azran. I'm getting there as well. Eventually. Surina, if I could throw that back to you. So Azran's talking about, Malaysian startups trying to get out across Southeast Asia because we have a slightly smaller population. With your MDEC hat on, what is the ecosystem? What does the ecosystem need to be able to enable more of startups from smaller Southeast Asian markets like Malaysia expand into the others? What can you do? What can we do?
So we need to continue to do one of the things that we've always done before. So continue to enable and train and make great entrepreneurs, much like Azran. So give that mentorship, give that opportunity. But the other thing also is on the investor side, which is why things like Penjana Capital, we went right on to address it. We need two things. We need the capital itself, but exactly to Azran's point, we also need to educate the investors as well. It's not the same thing. You can't come in and apply private equity principles and to this space. So as part of this broader initiative, what we're bringing, there's the 8 funds, well, 16 when you count the partners. Part of the expectation is to continue to not just educate the ecosystem, but the investors, other investors as well. We need to make sure that we expand the investor base, so the LPs are much more aware of how to invest into this space. There's lots of opportunity, and just now Pandu was saying across the different countries, the opportunity really is around that digital adoption part that I was telling about. There's a lot of inefficiencies in this system right now across the different sectors. And so startups that are able to actually, connect the dots and use technology to help with the inefficiencies, much like what Grab did in the early days and all these other companies, that's where the opportunity is. But we got to get more investors to appreciate this as well. You can't apply the same rules; it's never the same. And so, how do you think differently about investing? So to me, I think that's one area.
Got it. Can I get you to double down on that? So you've seen Penjana and outside of Penjana, external funds coming into Southeast Asia. Do you see investors looking at specific sectors more than others? And just speaking from experience here, my realization, 5 years ago, speaking to investors, it was mostly about the demographic dividend. Everyone was excited that it's a 600 million population, it's young, it's growing fast. And those were, what you put in your first slide to get every investor excited, right? Is that still the same, or is there some new factors that are becoming more interesting to external investors?
That I think what we saw during COVID times, there's a lot of, there's no one industry that suddenly just popped out and say everybody went into that. We're starting to see more activity into healthcare, of course, as you would imagine, but to me, I did not see this one, everybody going to this one space. What they were really looking for was, Azran alluded to that too, it's the team. So who can execute? Because one of the most important things right now, what differentiates one startup versus another, is their execution capabilities.
Got it.
Can I build on that?
Sure, please.
Yeah, because I think one of the challenges that we have here in Southeast Asia is the lack of corporate experienced talent coming into the startup community. And where this is going to manifest is, the ability to scale beyond Series A, right? Once you start getting into Series B, C, where you really need to have that kind of organizational and corporate expertise to, run 1,000-person teams across 10 different locations. This is where I think we are struggling, right? And, to build on, I think we had a question from Patrick, right? Like when you look at Southeast Asia, there are a lot of countries where you get a lot of fresh entrepreneurial talent, right? But I think the big gap is how do you go from that to, having the management capability to run scalable organizations, right? Unlike, for example, in the US, where you do see a lot more, 35 to 50-year-olds coming into the startup space, starting or at least being very active and present in management, so that the pool is bigger, right? So, for example, startups, as we think about scaling to 5 locations, where are we going to find the leadership talent for that? That for me is a big bottleneck right now.
What do you think is the answer to that question?
Honestly, it's time, right? It is, first we have to evangelize it. We got to get people excited about, leaving their boring corporate careers and jumping in, and the more successes we have, right? The more Series B onwards companies where people see that this is a viable professional career option, because a lot of people still say, well, look, if I'm working in a bank and a telco, it's very nice and safe. Why would I want to jump into this crazy world of flip-flops and shorts?
No, I absolutely agree with this. I guess in Silicon Valley nomenclature, they say 0 to 1 is easy, 10 to 1,000 is easy, 10 to 1,000 is where it's tough, right? Because you get all these corporates who know how to build larger companies. That initial stage, you get all these accelerators, incubators, the money coming in, but that scale up is really tough. If I pull from my experience, I think what Rocket Internet did differently, and it gets a lot of flack in Southeast Asia, but hiring a lot of ex-McKinsey, ex-BCG, ex-bankers, and giving them these kinds of, questionable. I come from that, so maybe my lenses are a bit, rose-tinted. But I found that having that strategy consulting experience really helped me be able to scale. And the 0 to 1 was extremely scary for me, but I had what it took for the 1 to 10 and onwards, right? So I don't know, like, I'm just going to push everyone here on this because I find it really interesting. Every time I speak to startups, they say, capital, we can work around it. Talent is the big issue. And it's talent across the board, right? It's not just software development talent. So if Azran, what you're saying is the key is getting corporate folks to jump into startups in the slightly riskier stages of startup growth. What are some things that have worked in other ecosystems? Could it be the startup studio model, a CVC model? Could it be, some kind of model that gets people to do secondments outside of corporates? Like, what have you seen work? Is there anything? I'm leaving this, Azran first.
Yeah, look, I think, so a CVC model would work. I'm very skeptical about secondments, right? Because for this to work, for you to build real entrepreneurial talent, like in my case, right? The reason why AirAsia X thrived was because, number one, we had to come in not as employees, but we had to put our own money in. There's a big difference when you have to put your own money in versus I'm seconded for my job, right? So I don't have a safety net to go back on. Number two, you also have to raise additional money outside, not relying just on your corporate parent to put in money, right? Because the moment you take institutional money and the governance and the accountability that you have for that, the pressure is completely different because the pace becomes much more intense, right? So I think what we haven't really seen much, certainly in Malaysia, is a CVC model that really pushes, co-creation and, like really building corporate entrepreneurial talent by setting it up right, rather than, kind of doing these projects that end up always just being projects.
Got it. Surina, can I get you to comment on that?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in the CVC model. I think it works over here. And part of the reason, because Ravi has heard me say this before, as has Haizam, part of the reason is because, we've got one of the big things that we're trying to do in general is drive digital adoption, right? And so the problems are clear. And so you need, if you're able to set it up, this sort of model, you can build from there. Our businesses over here, there's a lot of family-run businesses, a lot of private companies, and so which if you're able to, they want to say in what the setup of the problem actually is, they know what that is. And so you're able to actually just plop in the entrepreneur, the intrapreneur, and the team to go and do that. I think there's plenty of opportunity.
Got it. Entrepreneurs. I like that. And it makes absolute sense. Pandu, I want to like get the same question to you, but with one additional lens. I know that you went to GSB, and so obviously super techie school, lots of people.
I graduated. Sometimes
you graduated, didn't just go there.
Yeah, I graduated.
Thank you for the clarification. But so you graduated from GSB. A lot of people leave GSB and become tech entrepreneurs, and they come from very corporate backgrounds as well, right? So you've seen that ecosystem, and now in Indonesia, I'm going to go on a limb and say, from what I see from my contacts and friends, a lot of people also do leave cushy corporate jobs and get into startups, maybe a bit more than the other markets, right? What makes the Valley able to do that? Do you see that also happening in Indonesia, and how can the other markets also become a bit like that?
I think a lot of it is also luck, because we were able to get a couple of unicorns, some successes, so I think the venture business too here has scaled up significantly. Before pre-2016, 17 is actually a lot of it is mostly either conglomerates, personal capital, etc. Now it's actually become institutionalized, right? So our business too, before was just personal capital, now it becomes venture, etc. Now it's like 80%, 90, 85% are actually institutional capital, not even friends and family capital, etc. It's become real institutional capital. And that's healthy, because essentially you don't get punished for failure. You get rewarded, right, for taking risk. And that's a different mindset, right? So this was happening, and this is a big change of mindset, especially among the youth. People that are 20 to 30 and even 30 to 40, and now we're seeing it 40 to 50, right? So it's incredible because of the ecosystem, and you call it ecosystem, but essentially there's enough capital willing to reward you for taking risk and not punishing you culturally for failure. Because back in the days, my mom, my dad said, dude, what are you doing? You should go to work as a doctor, etc., or in banking. What are you doing whatever it is that you're doing, right? So that's something that's, I think, has translated really well the last 5 years, at least where I'm coming from, and that's good, right? It's really good. And what the last thing what's really good too, you're seeing actually new wealth being created, right? And this is important too, because for a lot of the conglomerates here, and I think for those of you that don't know, in Indonesia too, and probably some in the Southeast Asia, conglomerates dominate the economy, right?
Yep.
So, this is true across Southeast Asian countries. Conglomerate in the old economy, or whatever you want to call it, dominate the economy. The Rockefellers, right? I want to call it the Rockefellers of each country. Now, with what's happening the last 7 years, you're seeing new wealth. And these new wealth, and let's say my classmate Forrest, it's what, number 2 now, right? In Singapore, whatever the number is, that's new wealth, right? Yeah. And that changes the landscape of how people are thinking, right? That changes everything, the way people think, the way people behave and preserve, because you've seen precedent of success, right? Once you get the precedent, younger people, and it's not just young, it goes across the board, they think this is maybe another alternative to go through it, right?
Absolutely.
So that my view is a big change, mindset.
100% agree with this. I think the way I see it is, in the past, you used to believe that there was infinite downside and only limited upside. And when you see the companies that succeed, you start to see that the upside is actually exponential. Startups became sexy the last 5 years. I remember trying to recruit 5-6 years ago was just a nightmare. Now it's just become a lot easier. And you're absolutely right? Just like the PayPal mafia in the Valley, now you've got the Gojek mafia, the Lazaada mafia, the people who've left, and now they're trying to do certain things, right? Incredible. Pandu, I'm just going to throw this back to you, because there's a question from Victor Gan here on exactly what you just talked about. So I think Victor said, do you see startups like Southeast Asia? I'm going to read this question out. Do you think big players like SEA will monopolize the market in Southeast Asia, given their recent expansion in fintech and food delivery? And how can smaller firms compete against them?
It depends on the business. I wouldn't say monopoly. I mean, there's always going to be new unicorn, new decacorn coming out, right? Yes, there's going to be new conglomerates coming out, new GEs, right? GE of yesterday it's called GE, today you call it Google, same G, it's just different, right? So similar here, maybe now see, we've been quite significant in a lot of the different businesses, but it doesn't mean that there's can't be new players and new ideas to add value across that value system, right? So that's something that I think is super important, right? Because you've seen disruption, and disruption can change every 10 years. It's like BBM get changed to WhatsApp, and WhatsApp can be changed by something else, right? Based on what they just did the last week, right? So you're seeing Telegram adding 25, 50 million users, because it's all about disrupting, what is it called? Users' behavior, right? So it actually, what's going on with WhatsApp is super interesting. Just kind of like a side note. But the fact that they're saying, hey, man, you want to use me? Your data is mine. I think that's going to also be a significant change potentially happening of people using chats. I do wonder where people will switch. Were they willing to do it or not? So anyway, that's side comment, right? But that's essentially,
don't care about privacy.
Yeah. So, but that's something that's interesting too, because it doesn't mean that for C2 you always got to stay on top of your toes. We have the values that we always posted: be humble, you got to be smart, you got to be fast, and that's super important because these businesses change every year, 2 years, 3 years. So you got to be keeping up on your toe. Now, another thing I also want to comment, when you talk about companies going up, one thing that's also interesting is the level of maturation, and founders have to change too. Going from what you say 10 million, 50 million businesses to 500 million, and then to a billion, and then from a billion to 10 billion, the skill set is so different.
Yeah.
And I mean that, it's like, I see it, it's so different. Some people can handle it. Some people actually need help. But a lot of times you said, hey, I've been so successful reaching this, why can't I go above? But at a certain point, when you run organization, you actually really need professionals, right? So that's also another thing that we're seeing, that some of the unicorns too, we're seeing it, they do need help of having proper professionals. And this is something where it can be an opportunity for people that are looking to jump into the space. Look at the unicorn, there's a lot of holes happening. And that's something that, I think going to be either an upside or downside, right? Because the human capital need is actually all across the value chain, right? So I just wanted to build upon what was said previously in the previous discussion.
Nice. Thanks, Pandu. I'm going to switch to another question by Patrick, and this one I want to push it to Azran. So Patrick says, making money is clearly key to growth and financial sustainability, but how much are entrepreneurs and SEA attracted by social, environmental challenges, and is there appetite from investors there to foster this agenda? I'm asking this to you because you're clearly in a space where you're trying to solve topics like this. What do you think?
Well, again, so anecdotal personal experience, but I do see this growing very, very significantly because, a lot of people in the health tech, education tech, even financial inclusion has grown very, very significantly. We have now seen pretty large VC funds that are very focused on impact capital across Southeast Asia, especially in these three sectors: healthcare, financial inclusion, and education, where, sort of initial starting ticket sizes are, $1 to $2 million US, right? And so it's a very different ball game than, giving $100,000 check to someone who's doing a social enterprise. So I think where we're starting to see a shift is going from these small social enterprise trying to solve, kind of local community issues to how do you solve these bigger societal issues at scale? So that's definitely, I think, growing, certainly in the last, I would say 12, 18 months.
Got it. Where is that coming from? What's the impetus for that? Is it just founder led and they feel very interested about these topics, or is there like a macro level?
It's a confluence of two things, and this is why I wonder whether in Pandu's case, when Pandu you talk about smarter capital coming in, is it because we're now seeing LP money from the US coming in, right? Because certainly from the VCs that we deal with, who are much more focused on the social impact for us, they have been, because of institutional capital with an ESG agenda in the West, saying, hey, look, I'm interested in Southeast Asia, but I really want to make sure the money is much more focused on inclusive impact in Southeast Asia.
Got it.
So I think that's kind of one way where the money is coming from, that directs that focus.
Surina, is that something that you're noticing in your MDAC seat as well? Like, is a lot more capital coming in with a stronger ESG inclusivity agenda?
So I can't comment on that because I haven't been able to see just ESG specific.
Sure.
But I know as a general macro thing, it is something that everybody cares about. It's a topic of conversation.
Got it. So maybe not ESG, but let's flip that to inclusivity, because I noticed as I was reading up about you last night that you've set up lots of initiatives to grow female-led enterprises in your previous roles. Where do you think the ecosystem in Southeast Asia can be more supportive of female-led enterprises? Is there gaps, and what are we not doing?
So I think there are gaps, much like there's gaps all over the world. But we do have the community. We need to continue to cultivate at large. I've got like a little WhatsApp group on my own, and we talk about these things. And certainly, it has to shift from being a hobby to really being deliberate about investing in diversity, basically. I want to touch on the inclusion point. Certainly from an inclusion agenda, investors are much more discerning about that these days, because we need to make sure that whatever financial solutions, whatever solutions there is, no one gets left behind. So from a fintech standpoint, we're seeing a lot more increased appetite into fintechs that help with that. So things like smaller micro capital lending for to the areas, to the underbanked and underserved.
Nice. And is that coming across the board, or is that specific types of investors who have an inclusivity or ESG agenda? Like, is this the IMF and players like that, or is it like smaller VCs who are also interested in this topic?
I think it's a little bit of both. Because certainly our market over here, and because what's unique about Southeast Asia in general is that we've seen the other more advanced ecosystem, see some of the things that work and don't work. And so generally there's this whole issue of divide, and I think people are quite whenever they're looking at investments or projects or whatever, you need to be able to somehow touch on that inclusiveness, that divide. Otherwise, you're going to have a market where, for the macro growth of the entire region, that's not going to work. I mean, all these issues people are sensitized to. Let's just take agriculture, for example. As you're thinking about agriculture, that's a huge opportunity. I mean, I forget what the statistic is there, World Economic Forum things, but there'll be a significant amount of the population that if you don't do something, if you don't think about inclusiveness, Southeast agriculture, the farmers that we have, they're going to be left behind. So as a general matter, I think people are a little more attuned to inclusiveness, just given where we are.
Agreed. I think just to reflect on that, I think one of the most interesting things that happened in e-commerce, like when we started out e-commerce in Southeast Asia, the belief was that just like the West, convenience was the most important thing people cared about. And what we actually realized was reach and assortment mattered a lot more, because it was people in tier 3, tier 2 cities who couldn't have access to these brands and products that became our largest groups of customers. And I think that's across the board. Even if you look at payments and fintech as well, yes, the big cities are the ones that could pull a lot of the volume, but actually the ones who need it the most, whether it's GoPay, ShopeePay, Lazaada, whoever, it tends to come from tier 3, tier 4 cities. So absolutely in line with you. It's both, you help, but it's also where the opportunity is. It's one and the same. Very cool. I'm going to switch to another question from Odile Rohul. I hope I'm saying that right, because there's 2 likes, which means people need it to be answered a bit more. For US founders scaling their company globally, any specific city as a hub, if scaling in Southeast Asia? I probably won't ask Surina because you may have, some vested interest in answering this question. So Azran, I'm going to push that to you first because I know you've been based in Malaysia, but you've seen Air Asia X across multiple cities, and iFlix was in, I can't remember, but at some point I remember you expanding to Ghana as well. But just to get your gauge on that, any specific cities as a hub if you're scaling in Southeast Asia?
Hey, look, of course, I'm completely biased, but I think, KL definitely is a sweet spot because of, the reality is at the stage of investment, right? Because if you're an early stage company where capital is a constraint, you're talking about a 3x difference in cost versus Singapore, right? So it just makes a lot more sense because they're really the same quality of, engineers, digital marketers, business developers here as Singapore, but, 3x cheaper in terms of talent and the indirect costs of office space, infrastructure, and all of that. But I think very, very quickly, the question becomes moot because staying in Malaysia is insufficient, which means you need to have your teams in Jakarta, in Manila, in Bangkok, in Ho Chi Minh very, very quickly. So that ability to run multiple teams in multiple geographies is crucial because otherwise you're going to suddenly get stuck in a very small market. So, and the food here is pretty good, I hear.
Yeah, pretty good food. I agree. Pandu, can I throw that to you? What do you think?
I mean, you can choose.
Give us the obvious answer, Pandu.
Come on, stop, man. Everybody's very proud of their heritage, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this is what makes Southeast Asia unique. So, you can open in KL. I think it'll be perfect. You can open in Jakarta. It'll be good. You can open in Singapore, maybe because that's Asia light, in a way. That'll be good too, right? So depends wherever you want. If it's about taxes, people, ecosystem, all these are great cities, right? It depends on each of you individually. What's your preference, right? So, I mean, there's always pluses and minuses. There's no right one answer, to be honest with you. So you should actually explore and come. I mean, if you guys are there, come, right? So.
Got it. We've got a new question.
I gotta answer it that way. If not, it's gonna bring too much
it's a good answer. I guess depends what you're building.
One point that is different is the whole corporate setup for foreign-based companies, right? There are differences when you look at these, 5, 6 Southeast Asian capitals. How is it to incorporate a 100% foreign-owned business? Not straightforward.
Got it. Makes sense. So there's a new question that's gotten 4 likes. I'm just the new #1 ranking question. So Zubin Radhakrishnan's asking, how does Malaysia compete against Singapore to attract venture capitalists? What policy measures need to be taken? And because that's a policy question, Surina, I'm going to throw that to you.
I mean, we need to make it as friendly and as easy as possible. And so like things like Penjangan Capital, that's one of the things that we're starting with. So we're matching whatever the contribution actually is from investors. So that's a start. But the other things that we're looking at also is how do we continue to build out the other areas as well. So we talk about talent, and regulation is the other thing. And so some of the things that we've kicked off already, it's all the regulatory sandboxes and whatnot.
Got it. Makes sense. And if I connect those 2 previous questions, the Hive and other things are launching in Malaysia. So, you've got capital and certain opportunities like this in Malaysia. I'm going to pick a question that's actually in the chats that I think is pretty interesting. It's not in the Q&A, but Azran, I'm going to push this to you. Often technology interventions risk becoming a bit of a panacea to resolve deeply rooted social issues, health and education, when the ecosystem is still lagging. Because there's inadequate public investments in infra. What types of due diligence do you conduct to ensure that the solutions ultimately result in sustainable impact? I'm asking that to you because you are in a health tech startup and it's arguable where our infra is. How would you answer that?
Wow, so a couple of things, right? First, for example, and again, speaking from personal experience, trying to tackle chronic disease management and mental health in Southeast Asia. When you compare us to a lot of the companies in the US and China, over there's a greater emphasis on devices, right? Like all kinds of various really cool devices that monitor all kinds of biomarkers on the body to get a very accurate real-time read on health. But the reality is, even at for example, a $50 price point, it becomes prohibitive for mass rollout in Southeast Asia. So we have to then say, well, it's really cool tech, but that's not what we have to focus on, right? Where we've got to focus on is literally, maybe at most, someone has a rudimentary smartphone. But then what are the services that we can offer, number one? And number two, take, for example, mental health, right? The issue here is twofold. One, there's just a lack of mental health care professionals, right? The number of psychologists and psychiatrists per 1,000 population is 1/100th that of a market like Australia, right? And it's even more challenging in Indonesia. So, so simply kind of a telemedicine model breaks down. It just doesn't work because you just don't have supply, right? So you need to then rethink of a model. How do we make this, 10 times more scalable and challenge a lot of these telemedicine models, just because you just don't have a supply of healthcare professionals, and find a way to then drive down the cost by 10x. So that's kind of these are the problems we solve. I don't think we're anywhere close to saying, hey, we've cracked the problem per se, but it's something we're very oriented towards. And this is why as startups, there's this big decision point we have to make. Do we go after the mass market in Southeast Asia? Or some investors are saying, why aren't you going into Taiwan and Hong Kong and Singapore and Korea, because it's higher yield, it's a more established healthcare landscape, people are willing to pay 10 times more. Yeah, but that's not the fundamental problem that we're trying to crack.
Got it. Very good. I'm going to pick another question because we've got about 4 more minutes left. Given that some of you strongly believe in the idea of a CVC model for a startup to scale beyond Series B, and this connects back to what we were discussing earlier, simply because some entrepreneurs may lack the necessary corporate governance skill and that funding rounds are getting larger in size, where do you see the direction heading for the smaller VCs in Malaysia within the ecosystem? Or what are your suggestions for these VCs moving forward? As in some cases, it'll be tough for the smaller VCs to provide the same kind of corporate guidance or funding for scale. Can I push that to Surina first and then Pandu? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'd start with whatever the case is, we're all in a new learning environment. I mean, so I come back to what Pandu said earlier. It's still very, very early days. VC, startup, venture building, company building is a longer term game. So we have to have this longer term mindset, and also have this mindset of we need to continuously learn. So the way that we set Penjana Capital, for example, is set up, it's a partnership. We've got partners over here, VC firms over here, partnering with VC firms internationally to foster that exchange, if you will. And so, yeah.
But so throwing that to Pandu, do you think VCs need to have a bit more of an operational mindset and be hands-on with the startups? Like, are we done with the era of give your money and park aside?
Yeah, I think that kind of era has stopped for a while now. I think, I think it's for VC, and I think this is good about Malaysia too. This is one is actually interesting, because for Indonesia, we got a lot to learn from. Overall, whatever you're investing in, I think where VC adds a lot of value is always to be hands-on, not just park it. And this goes across as you go up, right? And I guess it goes back to your first question. As funding run gets bigger, where's Malaysia going to be positioned? Actually, take a step back. Malaysia is actually a provider of capital, not a user of capital, right? As a country, right? Because it's just this is where you are able to fund all across. It's just which pocket will it be coming from, right? So, C, don't forget, Gnananantham was an investor into C too. I don't know if people remember. You were an investor into us back before when IPO, and that was already a couple of $2 billion of equity value, right? And in fact, Gnananantham is actually a large global investor. I'm putting that as an example, right? So there has been companies coming out of Malaysia that becomes bigger and bigger. So there has been actually precedent of success. And I think for Malaysia, one weapon that you have, honestly, is capital. You are a provider of capital to Southeast Asia. Now it's more about how do you become more and more of an astute provider of capital. And technology, as part of just overall, right? probably makes up what, 10%, 15% of whatever it is, capital allocation that you have. And it's actually, you are able to at least have a say how the industry will also play out. So this is also something I just need to note that, because frankly speaking, actually Malaysia are able to provide capital at any level, to be honest, because you have been involved in every level. Indonesia doesn't have that privilege because the government doesn't get us involved, right? So we have to use our own capital and then third-party capital, right? So that's actually an opportunity, right? And a significant opportunity where you can, in a way, be part of the narrative. So anyway, I'll stop there because that was just something.
And on that exciting note about opportunities and more capital coming into the market, I want to thank you all for an exciting panel. That was super fun. And I hope to catch you guys soon. Everyone else who was on the call, please join what's, I think Maddie's going to share with you what's happening next week. But thanks, everyone. Thanks, Azran. Thanks, Surina. Thanks,
Ibu Surina. Thank you, Pak Azran. Terima kasih.
Thank you all for such an excellent start to this long conversation we're going to have. Thank you, Surina, Andrew, Pandu, Azran, and my colleague Haizam, who is also somewhere there. Maddie, any last?
I just want to say thank you to this amazing panel. We learned so much from you guys. I think I can speak for everyone. We wish we could keep going. And so we look forward to further conversations. I've dropped the links for next week's webinar, as well as just how to join the Hive think tank so you can stay up to date on all of our events. Thank you all for joining us today. This session is being recorded and will be automatically emailed to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.